Good evening. Pakistan has exploded 5 nuclear devices, exactly matching the number of Indian nuclear tests carried out a fortnight ago. The Pakistani Prime Minister said his country had no choice because the world had not taken action against India for starting the dreaded game of destruction. Tonight, the Pakistani president declared a state of emergency. Pakistan carried out its tests in the southwest of the country, near the border with Afghanistan. Owen Bennett-Jones is in the capital, Islamabad, from where he sent this report.
There was jubilation in Pakistan as news of the tests reached the streets. However strong the international calls for restraint, most Pakistanis wanted to match India's tests with some of their own. And now it's done, there's pride that Pakistan has become the world's 7th nuclear state.
I think this was very important for Pakistan for regional balance of payment to conduct nuclear tests. So I'm very happy about it.
We have done it because the world failed to condemn India in a proper manner. It should have to condemn it.
Just hours after Pakistan's nuclear devices were detonated, the Prime Minister addressed the nation on television. He said that in the face of aggression, Pakistan could not compromise. And he argued that once India had tested, Pakistan had no choice but to follow suit.
Our security and peace and stability of the entire region was thus gravely threatened. As a self-respecting nation, we had no choice left to us. Our hand was forced by the present Indian leadership's reckless actions.
Pakistan's opposition leader has argued for days now that the government should conduct a test. But she warned there'll be tough times ahead.
I'm afraid India and Pakistan have not done a very good job of managing things for themselves. I think it's important for Pakistan at this critical time. Our security today is threatened. We might rejoice in having a device, but that rejoicing will be short-lived.
When Delhi conducted its tests 2 weeks ago, there was widespread enthusiasm and support throughout India. But when the Indian Parliament heard of the Pakistani response, there was uproar and confirmation of new divisions between India's political parties.
That now it's a nuclear arms race which you have started in this subcontinent.
But the Indian Prime Minister insisted he'd been right to conduct the tests and declare that India is now a nuclear state.
Pakistan's nuclear tests have not come as a surprise to us. These tests have vindicated our policy. They have also confirmed our doubts. India is ready to meet any challenge.
The Prime Minister told the nation that there'll be tough times ahead as international sanctions are imposed. And he asked the people to prepare for austerity. The Prime Minister said he was willing to set an example. He'll be giving up the use of the recently built and very lavish prime ministerial offices in Islamabad. The nuclear tests, he said, are a great opportunity for Pakistan to learn self-reliance. Owen Bennett-Jones, BBC News, Islamabad.
The United States is already imposing sanctions on Pakistan. President Clinton said 2 wrongs didn't make a right. President Yeltsin said the tests, and those by India earlier this month, posed a serious threat to world stability and regional peace. And the United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan called on both countries to freeze their nuclear development programs. Ben Brown reports on the dangerous nuclear rivalry on the subcontinent.
Around the world, there's been sadness today, but little surprise that Pakistan has decided to join the club of nuclear powers. With a midnight phone call, President Clinton begged the Pakistani Prime Minister not to go ahead with the tests. But in the end, his appeals for restraint were ignored. So it was a disappointed Mr. Clinton who announced that Pakistan, like India, will be punished with sanctions that will deprive it of badly needed economic aid.
I cannot believe that we are about to start the 21st century by having the Indian subcontinent repeat the worst mistakes of the 20th century when we know it is not necessary to peace, to security, to prosperity, to national greatness.
NATO foreign ministers heard news of the tests as they were meeting in Luxembourg. Along with Russia, they issued a joint condemnation, while Britain said it was dismayed by this new South Asian arms race.
We condemn this action. It runs counter to the will expressed by the 149 countries who have signed up to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And it also runs counter to our efforts to strengthen the global non-proliferation regime.
Since partition in 1947, India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars. The world's nightmare is that if there's a fourth, perhaps over the disputed territory of Kashmir, it will go nuclear. For years, both countries have been competing ferociously, not only to develop nuclear weapons, but also ways of delivering them to the enemy. But do Pakistan's tests, monitored today in Britain, necessarily make the world a more dangerous place? Some experts say the threat of mutually assured destruction may terrify India and Pakistan into peace.
If there is a hopeful sign on this, it is that they will be more careful about entering into conventional conflict between the two of them, that they'll be more careful about, for example, escalating in Kashmir, because they will be aware that once escalation is started, that they might not have control over where it will lead to.
Pakistan and India bring to 7 the official club of nuclear powers after America, Russia, China, Britain and France. Now that club has been extended, the fear is that rogue states like Iran and Iraq, Libya and North Korea, all thought to be on the threshold of nuclear technology, may decide to carry out their own tests. A depressing prospect indeed for the new millennium. Ben Brown, BBC News.
Here, trades unions say they'll continue to fight for a higher national minimum wage figure than the one being put forward by the Low Pay Commission. The Commission's recommended a figure of £3.60 an hour after year-long consultations with unions and employers.
It is the economic floor. 1.5 million adults earn below £3.60 an hour. People like street sweeper Dave Harper.
On £3 an hour, there's no room for luxuries. It's a question of wake up, come to work, go home, cook food, go to bed, come to work. We're virtually wages slave at £3 an hour.
Cleaners in hospitals and other public bodies are one of the big groups to benefit, though some say the rate will be too low to make much difference.
14 pence, I think, more. But that won't solve anything. The expenses, how they are going up, it doesn't match to this minimum wage at all.
Industry has done its sums today. Broadly, it finds the rate acceptable. In textiles, though, there may be problems, because many British firms compete with third-world producers paying third-world wages.
Wages are going up. This is just another example of the government interfering and regulating when it would be best to leave it alone.
But the Commission softened one effect by exempting young people. It found in other countries teenagers lost jobs when their pay was protected. British fast food chains have already rejigged pay to raise bottom rates. McDonald's said its concerns were taken account of. Unions decried the youth exemption.
Now, we keep hearing about bringing young people into the workforce, giving them proper protection, making them part of society in a proper way. And now we're told that, oh, if you're a young person, you're a second-class citizen, you don't get full protection of the minimum wage. This is a big political mistake.
Not, though, an argument likely to appeal to ministers keen to befriend business and keep down the government wage bill. They study the Commission report over the next week and then probably accept and publish its recommendations.
The thing which is most important and which clearly still does not command universal acceptance is the principle of a minimum wage and a basic fair standard of pay at work.
The rate starts low and may rise if no economic damage emerges. Whatever the rate, a national minimum wage is a radical change. In the spring next year, about 1.5 million poor people will have their pay raised to the minimum rate. There is a debate about whether it'll cost some of them their jobs. The broad view in the big organisations on both sides of industry is that that won't happen to any great extent. Stephen Evans, BBC News, the TUC.
The International Aid Secretary, Claire Short, has told charities and agency crash, but he ordered ministers to cut spending and gave new powers to government tax collectors.
The markets have stepped back from the brink, for now at least. Share prices have rallied and the ruble is holding its own. But the crisis is deep and it is not over yet. Everyone knows that interest rates at 150% cannot hold back the tide for long. President Yeltsin convened an emergency government session. The achievements of his entire presidency are threatened by this. His place in history is at stake. He insisted that the ruble's value would not be compromised. He also declared war on Russia's new super-rich tycoons. They would now be forced to pay their taxes, he said. Russia's tax enforcers look more like mafia hitmen. The tax revenue system is chaotic and ineffective. The rich don't pay and the poor can't. That is the root of this crisis. Western analysts applaud President Yeltsin's new resolve. Now they say it's up to the West to make a corresponding gesture.
What we now need to see, I believe, is support from the IMF or G7 nations in terms of a loan to help the government stabilize the currency. And I think that would have to be in the terms of a minimum of $10 billion, perhaps as much as $15 to $20 billion.
Russia does...
The head of the IMF, Michel Camdessou, says he's considering less than $1 billion, and that's money that was promised last year anyway.
Reacting.
The cause of this crisis is not the Asian crash, it is the appalling state of Russia's public finances. To get out of it, President Yeltsin must force the rich to pay their taxes and force the poor to accept swingeing cuts in public spending. He will make powerful enemies of both. But unless he does, the crisis will come back again and again, and the ruble will collapse. And the achievements of the Yeltsin years will be swept away. Alan Little, BBC News, Moscow. The Prime Minister is to meet survivors of Japanese prisoner of war camps to discuss their claims for compensation.
Offers 2.5 million titles, but it never sees its customers. All these books are ordered and paid for over the internet, then dispatched to customers around the world.
Okay, you just type www.amazon.com. That takes you to our website.
Jeff Bezos founded the company 4 years ago when he was just 30. Now he's a billionaire. Amazon can offer a huge selection of books, cheaper than any conventional bookstore. Britain is an increasingly important market.
Britain is not only ready for us, but Britain is also just ready for the internet. The internet is a global phenomenon, and it's growing quickly all over the world. In fact, it's growing faster in the UK than it is in the US.
And it's not just retailing that the internet is transforming. The world's biggest plane maker, Boeing, says the internet is as revolutionary today as the telephone was in years gone by. In Boeing's cavernous spares department, orders arrive over the internet, cutting delivery times and costs. In design and construction, the internet has also improved productivity.
Well, look at this airplane behind us here. The wings that you see on that airplane were built in a facility that builds all of our airplane wings. And that facility uses the Boeing web to collaborate among our manufacturing sites to coordinate the flow of the parts so that that wing can be built and delivered to this assembly plant on time.
And it's not just in Seattle that the internet is being embraced by companies like Boeing and Amazon.com. Right across America, the new digital economy is creating wealth and increasing productivity in a way that simply isn't happening anywhere else. Here in Washington State, the benefits are measured in dollars and in jobs.
Today in the state of Washington represents 88,000 jobs. The average wage of the software portion of those high-tech jobs is $118,000 a year, which is an unbelievably good income.
The digital economy is a pot of gold which, so far, is principally benefiting America.
The manner in which the internet will transform the way we all shop, work and play is still emerging. But by placing itself at the cutting edge of this new technology, America has achieved the enviable combination of high growth, low inflation and virtually non-existent unemployment. There must be important lessons here for British industry to learn. Peter Morgan, BBC News in Seattle.
Here, a health union is calling for an inquiry after a hospital employed a 15-year-old girl to operate a heart monitoring machine. The girl was required to attach sensors to patients' chests at the Perth Royal Infirmary. The hospital says she was employed at weekends to free other staff for more important duties, but says she's no longer being used for the work.
The 15-year-old girl had been employed at the Perth Royal Infirmary since November, an arrangement which the hospital says allowed her to earn pocket money while freeing up doctors and nurses for more important clinical duties. The girl spent 3 hours every weekend operating an electrocardiograph, a machine used to monitor patients' heartbeats in hospitals throughout Britain. Her duties included attaching sensors to the chest and taking readings to medical staff. The hospital said it had absolute confidence in her ability to do the job, though it accepted there were sensitivities in employing someone so young.
She was doing a technique or a task that was straightforward, simple, and uncomplicated. It was always in a ward environment when there were other people around. If anything went wrong, she would not be expected to deal with it. She was not expected to interpret the record in any way. She was simply expected to take the record and clean the patient and the machine after it.
The public sector union Unison, however, was outraged, claiming that the person who used to do the job was made redundant 6 months ago, and it accused the Health Trust of putting patients at risk.
I think it is an insult to the staff who have trained, as I said earlier on. They have trained for a certain amount of time, in some cases 2 or 3 years, to do this job, and then they find or they hear about somebody like this just coming in and we give the job, and as the trust says, they've showed her how to work the machine. It's taken them 2 or 3 hours. I really do think it is an insult.
Hospitals in the Perth and Kinross Trust area have for some time employed school children interested in a career in medicine to give them work experience in a hospital environment. Until now, however, they've been school leavers from the 5th and 6th year, and the policy is under review. Andrew Castle, BBC News, Perth.
The England footballer Ian Wright has been ruled out of this year's World Cup competition. The Arsenal player was